The story begins on the sweltering tarmac of a Vietnam airbase, where a young lieutenant's elite military education instantly collapses into irrelevance, replaced by the gut-level terror of his new reality. It's a tale of the Butterbars, the brand-new lieutenants who faced an impossible task: to lead hardened combat veterans despite knowing less about survival than the men they commanded. What unfolds will expose the brutal unwritten curriculum of jungle warfare, reveal the life-or-death bond between a green officer and his battle-hardened sergeants, and uncover the shocking truth about how a soldier's rank means nothing when the bullets start flying. Before we begin this journey together, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, share this story with someone who understands that true leadership is earned, not given, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. They called them Butterbars. The nicknames weren't cruel, just accurate. A new second lieutenant arrived in Vietnam with polished gold bars, a clean uniform, and 4 years of academic training. What he lacked was the only thing that mattered: the knowledge of how to stay alive. The veterans knew the odds. Many wouldn't last 60 days. The learning curve here wasn't measured in semesters, it was written in blood, and the clock started the moment their boots hit the tarmac. In July 1965, Lieutenant Larry Gwyn stepped off AC 130 at Key Air Base. He was 23, carrying everything West Point had taught him. Within 30 seconds, he knew none of it mattered. The assault of smells, diesel latrines, the unique scent of a combat zone, told him so. Veterans boarding the plane home glanced at him with a mix of pity and dark amusement. They knew how this story usually ended. Gwyn had graduated with honors. But standing on that tarmac, watching dust devils swirl to the rumble of distant artillery, his education felt theoretical, even naive. The textbooks never mentioned the suffocating humidity or the weary, calculating gaze of seasoned soldiers. He was assigned to the 1st Battalion, 7th Cavalry, a unit that had just returned from the brutal Ia Drang Valley. Those men had fought hand-to-hand in the elephant grass. Gwyn had been practicing with blank ammunition on safe training grounds. The gap in their experience felt oceanic. 5 years later, in 1970, Lieutenant James Macdonald arrived at Firebase Airborne. The war's optimism had curdled, but the reality for new lieutenants was unchanged. He met his platoon sergeant, a wiry man with ancient eyes, whose handshake conveyed everything without words. Macdonald now commanded 40 men, most of whom had more combat experience in a month than he had in his entire life. That first night, both Gwyn and Macdonald lay awake, separated by years and miles, listening to the terrifying symphony of a war they didn't understand. The crushing clarity set in. They were responsible for men who knew more than they did, in a place where ignorance didn't just embarrass you, it got you killed. Their existential education was about to begin. The education began immediately. For Lieutenant Macdonald, it was a reconnaissance patrol west of the firebase. The map made perfect sense in the briefing tent. But within 20 minutes of moving out, the triple-canopied jungle shattered that illusion. The terrain bore no resemblance to the clean topographic lines. His men moved with a deliberate slowness he initially mistook for lethargy, until he realized it was hypervigilance. His heart hammered. Then, the point man's fist shot up. The patrol froze. Sergeant Kovac moved forward, examined the trail, and silently pointed out a near-invisible fishing line stretched at ankle height, connected to a grenade trap. Macdonald hadn't seen it until it was traced for him. "Charlie knows where patrols usually walk," Kovac said simply. It was Macdonald's first lesson. The enemy didn't play by the rules in his West Point manuals. This brutal gap between theory and reality was a constant, deadly calculation for the veteran non-commissioned officers and COs. Staff Sergeant William Collins had seen too many Butterbars come and go. After his 3rd lieutenant died in 6 weeks, he learned to assess them coldly. The pattern was grim. A new officer would arrive with textbook confidence, pull rank when questioned, and often get men killed by ignoring hard-won jungle knowledge. The consensus among sergeants was brutal. If a lieutenant wouldn't listen in the first week, he likely wouldn't see his second month. A good sergeant, like Collins or the battle-hardened Rodriguez, guided without undermining, teaching the unwritten curriculum of survival. They showed lieutenants how to spot a booby trap trail, why you never walk the same path twice, and most importantly, how to trust the gut feeling that screamed something was wrong, a skill no manual could teach. The first 2 weeks were a crucible of pure terror. Lieutenants didn't sleep, jumping at every sound. By week 2, exhaustion bred a numb imitation of competence. Then, reality delivered its invoice, the first firefight. For Lieutenant Gwyn, it was an ambush that erupted from thick jungle. The world dissolved into noise and confusion. His mind went blank, every studied tactic vanishing. Then Sergeant Collins was beside him, not taking command, but asking calm, pointed questions. Where's the fire coming from? Do we have casualties? The questions forced Gwyn's brain back online. He called for artillery, directed his squads, and they broke contact with 2 wounded, but alive. Later, Collins brought coffee and a quiet, "You did fine." It was the first validation that he wasn't hopeless. The lessons were relentless and humbling. Macdonald learned to trust the terrain, not the paper, when his map was proven utterly wrong. He had to swallow his pride and ask his sergeant for directions. Earning trust meant learning when to shut up and listen to corporals with more field time than he had total life experience. The stubborn ones, who clung to doctrine, faced a grim fate. Lieutenant Thomas Denton, arriving in 1967, dismissed his sergeant's advice and insisted on textbook patrol formations. Within 3 weeks, his platoon walked into an ambush that killed 2 and wounded 5. After that, his men worked around him, quietly adjusting positions and volunteering for other duties. It was survival instinct, not mutiny. But for those who listened, a transformation occurred. Respect was earned not by rank, but by action. When Gwyn volunteered to walk point on a dangerous trail or shared his water on a long patrol, his men noticed. When Macdonald countermanded a battalion order that would have led his platoon into a kill zone, they saw he would protect them, even from higher command. The heaviest lessons came after the shooting stopped. The weight of command was the solitary burden of writing a letter to a dead soldier's parents. It was the ghost of a young medic who bled out, apologizing. It was the moral contradiction of questioning the war's purpose while professionally ordering men to their potential deaths. By month 3 or 4, the change was visible. The terrified butterbar was gone, replaced by a leader who moved with purpose. His men followed him not because they had to, but because they trusted his judgment. The cycle was perpetual. 6 months in, Lieutenant Gwyn watched a new replacement step off a Huey, a fresh-faced officer who looked just as he had. Gwyn saw the new lieutenant meet his platoon sergeant and recognized the sergeant's patient, skeptical look. He realized with grim clarity the full weight of command. It was knowing the system would keep feeding these young men into the grinder, and he was powerless to stop it. The jungle didn't care about training or potential. It only respected the brutal, hard-earned lessons of survival. As the sun set, Lieutenant Gwyn returned to his hooch, the weight of command settling upon him once more. Tomorrow he would lead again, make life-or-death decisions, and carry the burden that defined the gold bar on his collar. Stripped of all ceremony, this was the essence of leadership: to bear the responsibility so his men wouldn't have to live with the consequences of every call. He now watched a new cycle begin, seeing fresh-faced butter bars arrive, destined for the same brutal education. The term two-week wonder was not just a nickname. It was a grim timeline, a prophecy, and for too many, an epitaph. Those first 14 days determined everything, whether an officer would listen and adapt, or become another cautionary tale whispered around the perimeter. Those who crossed that threshold were forever changed. They carried an education written in blood, a burden that could not be shared with anyone who hadn't shouldered it themselves. They had arrived in Vietnam as boys playing soldier. They left, if they left at all, as men marked by a war that didn't care for their sacrifice, in a jungle that kept its secrets, for a mission whose purpose often remained elusive. So, welcome to Vietnam, Lieutenant. You have 2 weeks. Your men are watching. Your enemy is waiting. And the jungle is utterly indifferent to your training, your rank, or your good intentions. The clock is already ticking. The lessons are waiting. Your survival hinges on skills you do not yet possess and factors beyond your control. Good luck.